Good morning. I call the session of the Public Service Commission to order. Madam Secretary, are there any changes to the final agenda?
There are no changes to the final agenda.
Thank you very much. Before moving to the agenda, I'd like to conduct a roll call of all commissioners. When I call your name, please confirm that you are present. Commissioner James Alisi.
Here.
Commissioner David Valesky.
Here.
Commissioner John Majori.
Here.
Commissioner Chenna Bright.
Here.
Commissioner Denise Sheehan.
Here.
And Commissioner Radina Vilova.
Here.
Thank you. Before we turn to the regular agenda, do any commissioners wish to recuse from voting on item 201? Commissioner Alisi?
No.
Commissioner Valesky?
No.
Commissioner Majori?
No.
Commissioner Bright?
No.
Commissioner Sheehan?
No.
Commissioner Vilova?
No.
Thank you. We'll now begin with the regular agenda. Our first item for discussion, item 201, case 24-M-0586, as it relates to consumer protections during extreme heat events. It'll be presented today by Kayla Whitaker. Chelsea Lequitera and Richard Berkeley are available for questions. Kayla, please begin.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. My name is Kayla Whitaker, and I am from the Office of Consumer Services. Over the past 5 years, the Department's Office of Consumer Services staff has worked with intervening parties and major electric utilities within rate case proceedings to enhance customer protections during extreme heat events. Can we pull up the next slide? Next slide. Thank you. At a high level, these utilities are prohibited from terminating a residential customer's electric service for incomplete or non-payment of bills during extreme heat events, which are defined as the combined effects of unusually high temperatures and/or humidity. This prohibition on terminations will ensure that residential customers, including vulnerable populations such as seniors, minors, and sufferers from chronic obstructive pulmonary disease or COPD, and other respiratory or pulmonary conditions, have access to the electricity needed for cooling, air conditioning, and the refrigeration of important, potentially life-saving medications. However, as shown in Slide 2, these protections currently vary across the major electric utilities: Central Hudson Gas and Electric Corporation, Consolidated Edison Company of New York, Inc., Niagara Mohawk Power Corporation, doing business as National Grid, New York State Electric and Gas Corporation, Orange and Rockland Utilities, Inc., and Rochester Gas and Electric Corporation. At this time, there are no standardized extreme heat practices for major water utilities such as Liberty Utilities Corporation, also known as New York Water or Liberty Water, and Veolia Water New York, Inc., or Veolia. In Governor Hochul's 2022 State of the State address, she directed the state's agencies to form a working group with the purpose of developing an extreme heat action plan to coordinate interagency investments and efforts to mitigate community climate impacts and prioritize assistance to disadvantaged communities on the front lines of heat vulnerability. In accordance with the Governor's directive, about 20 New York State agencies, which included DPS, subsequently developed and submitted an interim recommendation report. This interim recommendation report found that extreme heat does not affect all communities with the same severity, and overall, heat-related fatalities correlate with poor housing conditions, poverty, impervious land cover, high land surface temperatures, and lower access to air conditioning. In 2024, this working group issued its Extreme Heat Action Plan for the years 2024 to 2030, which is entitled Extreme Heat in New York State, Summary Impacts and Vulnerabilities Report, or the Summary Report. The Summary Report highlights the effects of extreme heat on public health, particularly in urban areas, and stated that across all regions of the state, the number of days with a heat index greater than 85 degrees Fahrenheit, 95 degrees Fahrenheit, and the maximum heat index are all expected to increase significantly. The Summary Report concluded that extreme heat will increase the demand on water supply, and concluded that and infrastructure, and detailed the need for increased water availability for the purposes of drinking, recreation, and cooling during extreme heat events. The draft order before you will institute a proceeding that will provide an overview of the existing protections among the electric utilities, how they vary, and assess their adequacy during extreme heat events in view of policy objectives with the goal of standardizing them as much as possible to establish best practices. Next slide, please. As shown on this slide, there are more days reaching a heat index over 90 degrees Fahrenheit in the most recent 5 years across several major New York cities compared to the temperatures in the preceding 5 years. The impact of extreme heat on New York residents, particularly the elderly, young, and vulnerable, is a major cause for concern, and these protections will begin to safeguard vulnerable populations from heat-related illnesses, which, owing to climate change, will continue to grow in number. Staff's proposal will take into consideration the impact extreme heat may have on customers in densely populated areas such as New York City, while balancing the practices and protections for those within rural communities. The draft order directs DPS staff to develop a staff proposal for public comment and commission consideration that aims to present and address standardized extreme heat practices, protections, and policies for the aforementioned major electric utilities, as well as establishing protections for 2 of New York's major water utilities, Liberty Water and Veolia. Additionally, staff will contact those working with the Long Island Power Authority, or LIPA, to determine potential areas of standardization for protections for Long Island customers. However, as you know, LIPA is excluded from the Public Service Commission's jurisdiction, but is subject to review by the Department of Public Service under the Public Service Law and their Operations Services Agreement. While the area of Long Island can be considered and classified as a collection of adjacent heat islands, it is also surrounded by water, which insulates it and results in lower temperatures than other traditional heat islands. Staff anticipates returning to the Commission with its staff proposal in the summer of this year. Staff is available if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Kayla. I know some may be thinking, why are we talking about extreme heat on one of the coldest periods of the year? But I appreciate you highlighting the timeline through which we'll be seeing this again, that it'll be very timely and appropriate, and I'm sure it'll be well discussed. Climate events are becoming more frequent, and as you point out, the last 5 years, the extreme heat days are far greater than what we've seen in the preceding years, a trend I worry will continue. So I think this is very timely, and very much appreciate the clarity provided in the previous chart, the second slide, highlighting the differences between the utilities, which only serves to reinforce the need for greater consistency between them. So thank you for your work in putting this together. Looking forward to seeing where this progresses. All right, Commissioner Alisi.
Thank you, Chairman. I had all of these clever things to say, but I think I said them before the meeting started. So, in any event, there is a time and a place for everything, and actually, the time to plan and be prepared is before you have a situation. So, I know there's a lot of hard work that went into this, and I'd like to thank everybody on in your group, as I usually do to the entire department for their hard work. But right now I wouldn't mind a little extreme heat, but we'll get over that. Thank you very much.
Let's see if you see the same in August. Commissioner Valesky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Kayla, thank you, Richard, and the entire team for bringing this to us to open this proceeding. I just had a quick question or two, and I should say I think it's a good idea to be including the 2 major water utilities in this proceeding, Veolia and Liberty. And the question I have, so within the last year or so, we did, I believe, 4-year rate plans for both Veolia and Liberty. And I just want to confirm, so neither of those rate plans contain extreme heat protections for their water customers at this time. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So the follow-up question would be, when we get to your staff proposal, which I believe is a 90-day window for you to present the staff proposal and then out for public comment, so we'll see something spring, summertime. Whatever proposal is presented to the commission for adoption, at the time of adoption, would those two water companies then be subject to whatever extreme heat protections would be developed, or would the two water companies have to wait until the conclusion of the current rate plans for any new standardized heat protections to take effect? If there's someone there that could answer that question, I'd appreciate that.
Yep. So we will be talking about it, and the commission's action would determine it in the summer. So it would supersede the rate cases.
So it could be included mid-rate case then, any new requirement.
Yes.
Yes, and I would point out, Commissioner, and this is Richard, that the boilerplate language of the Commission's orders in the last sections, and also in the last sections of all the joint settlement proposals, always has some language about if the Commission takes any action later that will supersede the contents of the joint proposal or the order, that the companies need to follow it.
Okay, thank you, Richard, for that clarification. I'll certainly be supporting the order and looking forward to staff's proposal in 90 days. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Majori.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation and your important work on this. I don't have any questions, but I do have a few remarks. Of course, I'll be supporting this item. It is necessary at this moment in time because as a result of our inability as a society to reduce our dependence on energy sources that contribute to climate change at a fast enough pace, we can expect, as you presented, more potentially extreme heat days in New York's future. Today's order is a necessary step to save lives. There's no need to exaggerate the immediacy or the magnitude of what within our lifetimes has gone from a theoretical threat to lived daily experience. Today, I mean this actual day, as Los Angeles burns and as ice hockey is played outside on the streets of New Orleans, the costs in human life, destroyed property, and disrupted economies as a result of climate change have become commonplace. I think of how last year 3 tornadoes hit Erie County, where I grew up, how inland hurricanes ravaged Florida, and how Canadian boreal forest fires have become an annual source of bad air across a large part of the continent, including Albany, New York, which is where we are today. So today's order represents a necessary adaptation, and much of the work we do to transform New York's energy sector is the most important work we do on this commission. I would be remiss not to make note of the context in which we take up this order, and here I don't mean the extreme weather events that we read about happening just by picking up the paper. Instead, I mean the shift in the federal government's orientation from trying, perhaps too incrementally, to transform the nation and the world's dependence on carbon-releasing energy sources towards renewable energy sources, to a new orientation that amounts to a war on clean energy. This new federal orientation will make our job more complex, and the need for adaptive orders like this, while perhaps inadequate to the larger task, all the more necessary. This is not the proper forum for political speech, so I'm not making a political point. I'm making a policy point. As I've mentioned in previous sessions, when Herbert Hoover pledged a car in every garage a century ago, he articulated a policy orientation for the nation that leads us to issuing an order today to better align utilities policies for protecting consumers against extreme heat in temperate New York. The policies of today will resonate for generations to come, and the policy shift that's happening today in Washington will not simply occupy more of our time in coming months and in coming years on this commission, but will accelerate and aggravate the most existential threat facing our species. Thank you, and in a small sense, I vote yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Bryan.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for the presentation, Kayla and team. So I will be supporting this item. We know our climate is rapidly changing, as Commissioner Majori just mentioned too. In the South, we just saw the worst snowfall and ice freeze that they've seen in, I think, over 150 years. So they haven't seen this type of weather since the late 1800s. We know there will be more extreme, intense weather events fueled by climate change, and they are only going to get worse before they get better. So we must take precautions to protect New Yorkers, to shield New Yorkers, and ensure safe, reliable service. This action we take today will begin that process, the process of evaluation and standardization to protect New Yorkers during extreme heat, and I look forward to reading the proposal of the actions you will set forth for the commission to review so that we can do just that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Commissioner Sheehan.
Like my fellow commissioners, I will also be supporting this item. Clearly very supportive of this order that will bring consistency across our approach to utilities and how they respond in extreme heat protections. I do want to acknowledge that this has been something that's embedded in the department's work to date. It's just we're now trying to get some consistency. I think that's welcome and much needed. I also wholeheartedly support the inclusion of the major water utilities in this order. As my fellow commissioners mentioned, we are seeing and have seen in New York the effects of extreme heat and wildfires in our own state, which is, shocking, was shocking last summer. And to think that we may not see that again would be foolish. So ensuring that we, protect people during these extreme heat events from the water side is really critical to saving lives, saving property, and will have, I think, really huge benefits across the line. So I will stop there and just say thank you, Kayla, for the presentation and staff for working on this, and I look forward to seeing the staff proposal in 90 days.
Thank you. Commissioner Vlhova.
Thank you. I will be brief. As always, going last means that my colleagues have already expressed pretty much everything I'd like to say. I also thank staff for your hard work on this. I look forward to our staff working collaboratively with the utilities on standardizing our practices and priorities around heat protections. Thank you, and I will be voting yes.
Thank you. All right. That said, my vote is in favor to institute the proceeding to examine consumer protections during extreme heat events as discussed. Commissioner Alisi, how do you vote?
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Valesky?
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Majori?
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Bright?
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Sheehan?
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Vlhova?
Yes.
Thank you. The item is approved and the recommendations are adopted. With that, we'll now move to the consent agenda. Do any commissioners wish to comment on or recuse from voting on any items on today's consent agenda? I'll begin with Commissioner Alisi.
No.
Thank you. Commissioner Valesky.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a brief comment on one item. It's actually the last item on the consent agenda, item number 666, regarding the Affordable Broadband Act, and I do plan to vote in favor of the item. The item that is before us today confirms a recent one commissioner order approved by you, Chair Christian, on the 9th of January that provided for the enforcement of the Affordable Broadband Act beginning on January 15th. And it also reopened our 2021 proceeding to implement the act. I support and welcome the chair's order and its directives. The New York Affordable Broadband Act provides a pathway for qualifying New Yorkers to access broadband services. Accessibility to broadband, as we all know, plays an important role in helping New York residents pursue educational, employment, and healthcare opportunities. The ABA was enacted back in 2021. However, various trade associations for internet service providers initiated a litigation challenge to the legislation, and they effectively stopped it for about 3 years now. Just last month, the United States Supreme Court unanimously rejected the company's litigation effort, a ruling that has led us to the chair's order and to today's vote on the confirming order. And I'm certainly pleased that the ABA can now be implemented. So as noted earlier, I will be supporting the confirmatory order in item 663. Thank you.
Thank you. And just to confirm, that is item 663, right?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Great. Commissioner Majori.
I don't have any comments or recusals. I will note at this time, I'm going to abstain on one item, which is 370, which is 24T0446. And I'll repeat that when we do the roll. I'm going to abstain rather than recuse. And other than that, I have no comments.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Bright.
Thank you, Chair. No comments or recusals. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Sheehan.
Thank you, Chair. I will be recusing from item 362. And I do just want to make some comments on, what is this item? Sorry. The long-term gas plan. 164. So I know we've been working on these different long-term gas plans with our different utilities, and I want to compliment staff for their hard work on this order with respect to NYSEG and RG&E. Folks who've been engaged in this, I just want to highlight a couple of things in particular. There are a lot of things that are required in this order in terms of additional steps, including, importantly, the creation of demand response programs, additional investments in non-pipes alternatives, with the things that are particularly of importance to me, and a review of the BCA analysis. So I just wanted to highlight that one. This is obviously an important item for many of us, and we're watching this closely and we'll be paying attention to the future filings. So I'll be supporting it. I just wanted to highlight those items. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Vlova.
No recusals, and also a brief comment on item 164. I echo Commissioner Sheehan's thanks to staff for working on this order, as well as all of the parties who provided insightful comments that shaped our order today. I look forward to seeing continued information and learnings come from future filings, both new LTPs from utilities that haven't filed yet, as well as future iterations of NYSEG and RG&E's filings, particularly around the assumptions that the companies are making regarding the pace of electrification, as well as developing a more comprehensive joint planning approach between their electric and gas businesses, and also around ensuring a just transition for both the company's union represented and non-union employees, and important questions about how we measure the environmental attributes of renewable natural gas. My hope and expectation is that between now and the company's next LTP filing 3 years from now, we will have made lots of progress on these important issues. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll now do the call for a vote. My vote is in favor of the recommendations on the consent agenda. Commissioner Alisi, how do you vote?
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Valesky.
Yes on all items.
Thank you. Commissioner Majori.
Yes on all items, except I'm abstaining from 370, which is, again, 24T0446. All other items, I'm voting yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Bright.
Yes on all items.
Thank you. Commissioner Sheehan.
Yes on all items except recusing from item 362.
Thank you. Commissioner Vlova.
Yes on all items.
Thank you. And with that, the items are approved and the recommendations are adopted. Thank you all. Madam Secretary, is there anything else to come before us today?
There's nothing further.
All right. And with that, I adjourn today's session.